Okay, folks. So today we'll study ElGamal encryption, and before that, we'll see what are the issues with something that we studied, the Diffie-Hellman algorithm. Okay, so here we are. We have already completed all this symmetric encryption, which gives mainly confidentiality. We completed MAC and HMAC. We have yet to complete RSA. Actually, it should be it should not be, we should have used light fonts here. Then we have completed hash function, pseudo number generated. Diffie-Hellman also we have completed, but we will study the weakness of this. And then we'll study today ElGamal encryption. All right. So last class, that's today morning, we have studied the following. No, it's a magic, right? Nobody would have imagined this was possible about 20 years back, 30 years back. Okay. Now note that the communication medium is insecure, like internet, plain internet. Now note, in internet also we provide security only at the end. All the routers in between where your IP messages go through are insecure. Nobody, they don't give a guarantee, that your message will not be seen by anybody. They also don't give a guarantee that your message will not be dropped. Okay, so it's absolutely insecure, unreliable medium it provides. Now here in this class we are not so much bothered about unreliability, we are bothered more about security. Okay, now over this in unreliable or insecure channel, Alice has to send Bob key reliably, right? Or both of them should come out with the same key. That's the challenge. Okay, now we are looking at the first method, which is Diffie-Hellman, that we studied today, and it goes as follows: that Alice generates, so both Alice and Bob generate secret key and public key. Now they do it independently. Okay, so Alice generates A. Okay, this is a number she takes up between between 0 and p minus 1. I think I am skipping those details here. Okay, and then generate G raised power A mod P, where P is G and P are known to everyone, is published. Okay, and these are very large number of the order of 2 raised power 2k kind, one of those numbers, right? G is usually known, G and P both are known. A is also large. So this G raised power A mod P could be very large number. G raised power A will be very large number. Okay, from this Alice computes G raised power A mod P because she first computes A, and this become public key. Similarly, Bob first gets key B, okay, which is a private key, and he generates it randomly, and from that, and of course there are it has got to be less than something, less than P. Okay, and then calculates from this public key B. Now both of them exchange this, right? So Alice exchanges public key with Bob, and Bob exchanges his public key G raised power B with Alice. And now Alice uses her private key A. So by raising power of public key, that here is Bob's public key, which is G raised power B, exponentiate it with A, and she gets G raised power AB. Similarly, Bob gets G raised power AB. And in between, Eve looks at G raised power A and G raised power B, and from that she cannot get G raised power AB. She cannot get this. Of course, she can get G raised power A plus B, which is meaningless number. Okay, so this is one which we studied. So now note that both parties, Alice and Bob, both choose this number, their own private key independently, A and B, and from that both generate public key. Note that there is a relationship between public key and private key, and then they exchange only public key. As simple as that, right? And then once public key is received, by Bob's public key received, she uses his her private key to compute shared symmetric key. Okay, all right, it's all mathematics. Now, where is the issue here? If we have Eve in between, and she is very simple girl, right? She's just interested in snooping around. She's not malicious in nature. She's just curious what's happening between Alice and Bob. She cannot create this, but Mallory is more malicious, right? So if instead of Eve, if we have Mallory, then what can happen? She can do MITM attack, man in the middle attack. Okay, so let's see how she can. Of course, these are the numbers that we have discussed earlier, so please go through it. We will not repeat it. Okay. All right. Just a minute. Okay. So we have seen Eve can't do much. Okay, if there is a Mallory, then she can tamper with the message. It means that she intercepts the message before it goes to Bob and changes it and then sends it to Bob. Change message, right? So it's now what happens? There is a Mallory here. She also knows G and P. Okay. Now Alice sends a message. Okay, this is the normal Diffie-Hellman key exchange. Now here Alice sends. Okay, all right. Let's look at this way. G and P are known to everyone. Alice generates private key A, Bob generates private key B, and Mallory also generates her private key M. Okay, and she also gets her public key, which is G raised power M mod P. So M is private key and G raised power M mod P is public key. So Alice generates private key and gets her public key, and she sends it over internet to Bob. In between, Mallory receives it. So this does not go to Bob. Mallory in between, because Mallory is man in the middle. She intercepts this, and then she calculates from. She uses her own private key to get G raised power AM as shared key between Alice and Mallory. Okay, and then the Mallory sends this G raised power mod P, which is a public key of Mallory, and then Alice receives this, and Alice from this computes the shared public key. Shared key, right? Shared secret key, which is G raised power AM. Now here Alice doesn't know that she is communicating with Mallory. Similarly, on the other side, okay, Bob sends his public key G raised power mod M, and from that Mallory computes shared public key. Shared secret key, which is G raised power MB between Mallory and Bob. Similarly, Bob receives public key of Mallory, which is G raised power mod P, and calculates G raised power BM. Okay, so note that between Mallory and Alice, both can communicate with G raised power AM because both have this key, shared key, secret shared key, and between Mallory and Bob, there is this key, G raised power BM. Now Mallory, Alice doesn't know that she is communicating with Mallory, and Bob also doesn't know that he is communicating with Mallory. So now what Mallory can do? She will receive something from Alice and then change the contents of the message and send it to Bob, and so on. From Bob, she will receive something and send it to Alice. Okay, so Diffie-Hellman algorithm allows man in the middle attack. Any question? Okay, please go through it, you will understand. It is simple. Huh? So as a result of this attack, there is no integrity and no authenticity. Integrity means that Mallory is able to change M to M dash. And authenticity, it means that Bob doesn't know that he is receiving message from Mallory instead of Alice. Okay, so how do we solve this problem? We solve it with digital signatures, that we'll study in the next class. Let's see if time permits, then we'll study it today, otherwise we'll do it in next class. Okay, so what are the issue with Diffie-Hellman algorithm? It's not secure against MITM advisory. Now Diffie-Hellman algorithm also is active protocol. What do you mean by active? It means Alice and Bob needs to be online at the same time to exchange keys. If Alice or Bob, one of them is offline, then this algorithm will not work, obviously, right? Now this question you need to answer yourself, that what if Bob wants to encrypt something and send it to Alice for her to be read later? It means Alice is not online, but can she read it later? Is it possible? How? And if so, then what should be done? What can be done? Let's assume that you are sending a mail to somebody and the person is not online. Then what can be done, right? All right. So Diffie-Hellman does not provide authentication. All right. So we have seen all these issues with Diffie-Hellman. First thing is that Alice and Bob generate shared key based on something, right? Based on some parameters. What is that parameter? A and B. Okay, so from this, we create public key and exchange public key and use public key and private key and get something. But so something that comes out which is shared key is not controlled one, right? So one doesn't know that this is going to be the shared key. It's something out of independent choices of Alice and Bob. And secondly, both have got to be online, so it's inconvenient to use. It requires Bob and Alice and Bob to coordinate somehow to establish shared secret key. Okay, so now we need to solve this problem, and we'll move to next one, which is ElGamal, which actually solves in some extent but not fully, and then we'll move to the next one, RSA. In RSA, we'll see it solves this problem, right? That A and B can be, between Alice and Bob, that there's no need for coordination. Okay, any question? Okay, now we'll revise some concepts public key. Now we are ready to discuss public key cryptography, because Diffie-Hellman because it generates a shared key, over insecure channel, and so it gives you aspect of public key cryptography, right? Okay, so basically in public key cryptography we have each person, okay, generates two keys, public key and private key. Public key and private key. So we'll say private key, say A, and public key capital A, for example. Is there a relationship between public key and private key? Of course, yes. Otherwise, whole scheme will not work. Okay, and we have seen that uses modular arithmetic, factoring, discrete algorithm problems, all this. But note that here, this point is important. When we study RSA, it becomes clear that messages are just numbers. So when you send an email to somebody, can you convert that email, for example, I owe you something, 10 rupees, something like this. Can we convert this to a number? I'm asking you. Of course, yes. Now this number could be large. Okay, and what we are talking in public key cryptography, number could be between say 0 to 2 raised power 2024, 1024, 2048, something like this. What is 2 raised power 2048? Is huge, huge, very, very big number. Okay, so anything, any even big file you can convert into a number, because here I, for example, here I correspond to some ASCII number, right? So you can convert this into whatever digits, right? Blank is also correspond to something, O corresponds to, each character corresponds to something, so we can create this, and then you look at all zeros and ones, finally this becomes a number, a binary number. Okay, all right. All right. So benefit of public key cryptography is that unlike symmetric encryption, we don't assume that Alice and Bob already shared a secret key. And we can see that Alice can send a secret message to Bob without even knowing him. This is the ultimate thing that we can do in RSA. Okay. Okay, before reading RSA, let's look at ElGamal algorithm. So this point we already seen. Every participant, that's Alice and Bob, generate two keys, public key and private or secret key. Okay. And when Alice wishes to send message to Bob, she uses Bob's public key to encrypt her message. Okay, and Bob then uses his own private key to decrypt that. Simple. Okay, now anybody can send. Now here is Alice, and she has published her public key. Her public key say PK. Oh, what happens? Alice. She publishes or she sends it to all, and everyone receives it correctly. That's assumption. Okay, so everyone can use Alice's public key and say to encrypt the message and send it to Alice, and Alice can decrypt it using her own private key. Okay, now the question is that, for example, here is Bob. When Bob is encrypting this, encrypting message say M, does he only need to use Alice's public key, PK Alice, or he needs to use something else also? So in ElGamal, we'll see that he uses something else also, and that else could be, that else is nothing but his own private key. But in case of RSA, we'll see we can use only public key of Bob to encrypt the message. But for time being, let's ignore this small deviation in case of ElGamal algorithm. But in general, this is the principle. Okay, so it means that in public key encryption in general, anybody can encrypt with public key of Bob. Okay, when Bob is recipient, and only Bob can decrypt it with private key. All right, so it goes like this. So I'm using a lot of pictures so that it becomes clear. So every participant generate two keys, private key and public key. Okay, like here is Alice, here is Bob. Okay, now Alice is using, now Alice wants to send a message to Bob, and Alice has a message M. So Alice uses Bob's public key to encrypt this message M and create a ciphertext which she sends it to Bob. Bob receives the ciphertext and uses his own private key to decrypt it. So this is the basic model of public key encryption. and we have seen in case of Diffie Hellman, instead of this, what we have done is that we have generated shared key between the two entities which they can use. Now here the is slightly different, that anybody can encrypt Bob's and anybody can send. It's not one-to-one, right? Here, note here is not really one-to-one, as we have seen in case of symmetric algorithm and also in case of Diffie-Hellman. Here, anybody, it could be Alice or it could be Davis or whatever, David or whatever. As long as he knows Bob's public key, can encrypt message using his own message using Bob's public key and send it to Bob, and Bob can decrypt it with his private key. Okay, so basically, if you look at public key encryption in general, then it has three-part: key generation, both sender and recipient generates public key and private key. PK is public key, SK is secret key, okay, or private key. And then if Alice wants to send something, she has to get public key of recipient to whom she wants to send, and uses that public key to encrypt her own message and get the secret key. Now when we say here PK, it means that public key of recipient. Okay, and when recipient receives a message C, he can or she can use secret key or his own private key to decrypt it. Now, if you just read it from the text, it may be little confusing, because here the PK does not belong to Alice, but when Alice is encrypting a message, she has to use public key of Bob. Okay, any question? Yeah, is it clear or not? Just think about it. I think you'll get it. And we can prove that it's about its correctness, efficiency, and security. Okay. So again, pictorially, I'm trying to give you as much pictorial representation of the concept so that you can understand it. Alice and Bob wants to communicate to each other. Alice has something to send to Bob. So Alice to Bob, communication has to happen. So Alice has a message to Bob. All she needs is Bob's public key, which Bob sends to Alice. Alice receives this public key. She does encryption. What encryption? It is not symmetric key encryption. It is, for example, is one of the asymmetric key encryption. Here we are assuming that it is ElGamal or RSA. Okay, and she uses, for example, RSA, and she uses Bob's public key to encrypt message M and get ciphertext. She sends ciphertext to Bob. Bob receives this ciphertext and decrypt it using same algorithm, say RSA, for example, and uses his own private key or secret key to get message M back. Okay, all right. This is another representation. All right. Okay, so we'll just please go through it. Now another analogy we can give of this method, which is public key encryption, is a distal lock. Many books give this analogy, so I thought I will give this analogy to you. Okay, suppose you have a dabba or box, okay, like a trunk, okay, and okay, so now earlier we used to have two locks, right? And all right, now let's not take this example. Some books take this example, but what we say is that there is a lock in this suitcase, okay, or box, and lock can use two keys, one to lock and other to unlock. Okay, all right, so so Bob is able to implement distal lock, which only he has the key to unlock. But anybody, Alice for example, uses this log to send it to Bob to encrypt message. So only Bob can open the box, but anybody can close the box. So it's like this. So this is a log which has 3 positions, A, B and C. B is unlocked, right? You can open this cover. Okay. When you turn this log towards anti-clockwise, then it gets locked. When you move towards clockwise, then it gets unlocked. Okay. So right now let's use these 2 positions A and B. C will study when we will look at digital signature. Okay. All right. So basically it has 2 kinds of keys, and both keys will go inside here in groove. Okay, what keys can go here? Now it is Bob. This box belongs to Bob. Okay, so basically 2 keys that can go here in here are Bob's private key, or we can SK Bob, and Bob's public key, which we call it PK Bob. Okay, now PK Bob is available to everyone, and box is initially open. So anybody, for example, Alice, flips open the cover and then and puts her own letter or private message inside and uses the key, Bob's public key which she has, and turn it towards anti-clockwise, and it becomes locked. Okay, you would have seen, sometimes we have a lock. I mean, it's not exact analogy, which you just press, this, what do you call that, whatever comes out, right? And then it gets locked. So anybody can lock it. Those locks are available. Those are very cheap lock, right? So, your friend is also in your room, and then you say, all right, when you go out, just press it, it will get locked. And only you have the key to unlock it, right? Okay. So similarly here, we have just 2 keys, and Bob's public key is known to everyone. So everyone can lock it, but only Bob can unlock it. So this is analogy. All right. So since Bob only has private key, when this box is in transit and Mallory or Alice, Eve receives it, then she doesn't have private key. It's locked. She cannot. She has public key which goes only in one direction, right? So she cannot move the lever onto clockwise direction. So nobody can open it. All right. So this is something that we have discussed, right? Okay. So all these things we have already discussed, so I will not go into details. So what we have covered is already Diffie-Hellman, which is kind of, it's not exactly public encryption, although it comes under public encryption algorithm. Then ElGamal we will study today, and the next class we will study RSA. But before that, let's see do we have a relationship between key length and security levels? Yes, right? So here in public encryption, we use very long operands and very long size keys. Okay. So now we have to compare it with symmetric key algorithm, like we have studied AES, DES. Okay. So this is symmetric key algorithm. So we can say that if we are using 80-bit key in, for example, AES, then security level is 80. If we are using 128-bit key, then security level is 128. So we are comparing it with symmetric key encryption algorithm. So if we have to achieve same level of security, then in RSA we have to use key which is 1024 bits, or corresponding to 128 bit we have to use key which is 3072 bits, and so on and so forth, right? So it means that to achieve security level of symmetric key algorithm, we have to use very long key, which may be more than maybe more than 20-30 times, and so on. All right, any question? Okay, all right. So now let's move to ElGamal. Now the question is that why are we doing all this? Why not use directly Diffie-Hellman? We have answered this, right? Diffie-Hellman, you don't have control over what shared key you will get, because both Bob and Alice independently choose parameters. So it does not quite deliver public key encryption directly. So it allows Bob and Alice and Bob to agree on shared key that they could use for symmetry key, but they can't control what the shared secret is. Okay, because both Alice and Bob chooses A and B, which is kind of random values. All right, and most important thing is that they can't send encrypted message of their own. Once they agree, both Alice and Bob have shared secret or shared key, then they can use symmetric key encryption. You understand it? Okay, so the Diffie-Hellman algorithm, what we achieved is that both Alice and Bob are able to achieve it common color, or sorry, or the one which is, or the key which is both of them can achieve, right? Uh, but they cannot, in the same step, they cannot, without using symmetric key algorithm, they cannot send message across. Okay, now we want to solve this problem. Okay, so we have ElGamal algorithm, which is based on a small trick over Diffie-Hellman algorithm. Now many people say that ElGamal algorithm came almost at the same time, but we will not get into all those discussions, right? So now first part is same. So public system parameters are P and G. Everyone knows this. Okay. So Bob chooses a random value B. That's his private key. And from that, Bob calculates his public key, which is B is equal to G raised power mod P. So this part is same as Diffie-Hellman algorithm, right? All right. Now similarly, Alice also chooses her private key, which is R, and from this she generates her public key, which is, I think, capital R, if I'm not wrong. Okay, yeah. Okay. So Alice has private key as R and public key as capital R. Bob has private key as B and public key as capital B. Okay. Now Alice wants to send message M to Bob. Note that here M is in the range 1 minus P minus 1. 1 to P minus 1, sorry. Between 1 and P minus. So message here M we are considering as a number. Okay. And then, all right. So now what she receives Bob's public key. What's the next step? She calculates her own public key from private key. So she has private key and she then gets public key. So from R she gets capital R. Okay. Now it means that now Alice has R and capital R, which is private key and public key. Bob has B and capital B as private key and public key. Now the communication starts between Alice and Bob. Alice has a message M, which is a number, to send it to Bob. Now she creates a ciphertext, which is R. It means that she sends her own public key to Bob. First parameter is public key. Second is M times B, which is Bob's public key, raised power of R mod P. Okay, so this becomes ciphertext. That's her own public key and message M, whatever she wants to send, multiplied with Bob's public key raised power R. Note that R here is her own private key. Okay, so now the ciphertext is G raised power mod P, which is nothing but her own public key R, and this number M into B raised power mod P. Okay. Now here the assumption is that if Alice uses and Bob use this, or in a communication between Alice and Bob, and she used the value of R and R, capital R, repeatedly with the same value small r and capital R for many messages, then she will leak some information. So for every message she has to change the value of R and capital R. Okay, is her private key and public key. Okay, so Bob receives, okay, right now forget about this point. So Bob receives message M in this form, or message in the form of R and S. R is Alice's public key and S is nothing but what we have calculated here, B raised power R mod P. B is Bob's public key and multiplied with M. So M into B raised power R mod P. Okay. All right. So once Bob receives it, all he does is the following. He looks at R, which is Alice's public key, and multiplies or exponentiates it with minus B, that's his own private key, and S mod P. Okay, S is something that he has received, this B raised power mod P. So this one, right? Okay, so basically whatever message, encrypted message he receives, all he does is multiplied with R raised power minus P. And we can see through this calculation that this results into M. You can look at this calculation here. Oh, does it look again very interesting? Okay. So now we can conclude, and we'll have one example before we close. Okay, so first part is key generation. Okay, Bob generates private key, which is a random key, and from that he gets public key. Okay, and he sends public key to Alice. Okay, and then he here comes Alice, right? This is done by Bob and Alice both. Bob sends his public key to Alice. Alice receives it and then encrypts her message M using, okay, and using Bob's public key. Okay, all right. Okay, and there is a way of doing this which is given here. So basically Alice computes M into G raised power P, which is Bob's public key B raised power R mod P. Okay, and so basically then she sends in the form of C1 and C2, or earlier we have taken different notation, but anyway, this is her Alice's public key, and this is nothing but M into G raised power B mod P. And once Bob receives it, he can simply decrypt it by taking this value and multiplying it with, or exponentiating it minus B. All right. Okay. All right. So it's easy to understand it. Plus, please go through it. Let's take one example, then it becomes little clear to you. But please go through this mathematics to understand it. Okay. Let's assume that M is 26, which Alice wants to send it to Bob. Note that message is always a number. Now this is a toy example. It means that we are taking very small value. Okay, it could be, this number could fill in hundreds of such pages, or at least tens of such pages, right? Can be as big as that. Okay, Now these are public parameters. P is equal to 29 and G is equal to 2. Okay. All right. So Bob generates private key B is equal to 12, which is random generation of private key. And from that he computes his public key, which is B raised power G raised power B mod P. That's 2 raised power 12 mod 29, which is equivalent to 7. And you can use modular mathematics to reduce the complexity. So now 7 is the public key of Bob. Bob sends this public key to Alice. Okay. All right. Now Bob's private key is 12 and public key is 7. So now Bob sends to Alice his own public key, which is 7, and also sends these parameters P and G, which anyway are public. Okay. So now similarly, Alice has to get her own private key, and she randomly chooses R is equal to 5. And from that she computes his own public key, which is 2 raised power G is 2. So 2 raised power 5 mod 29, because P is 29, so which is equivalent to 3. Now she has to, using Bob's private key, which is 7, her own public key, private key, which is 5, and M, she has to get ciphertext C. Okay. So she gets ciphertext, sorry, C, or here we are using, say, S, okay, which is equivalent to M. M is nothing but 26, okay, into B raised power R. B is what? 7. R is equivalent to 5, so 7 raised power 5. So we are doing this calculation, 26 into 7 raised power 5 mod 29, which is equivalent to 26 into 16 mod 29. You can reduce this to 16, which is equivalent to 10. So this is a ciphertext she sends, Alice sends to Bob along with her own public key. Okay, so she sends her own public key, which is 3, and ciphertext 10 to Bob. So Bob receives this 3 and 10, and he does this computation for decryption R raised power minus B S mod P. Okay. All right. So S basically this number is anyway okay, S mod P. So what is value of R? R is what? R is Alice's public key. So he uses a public key which he has received, which is 3. B is Bob's private key, 3 raised power minus 12, into S. What is S? S is 10 and mod P. Okay, P is 29. So it calculates this 3 raised power 12 raised power minus 1, 10 mod 29. And now there is a little complex operation here because there is an inverse function here. So this will turn out to be 20 into 10 mod 29, which is equal to 26. Okay, so message that Alice has sent, Bob is able to recover that message back. Okay. Now please go again. You know, I mean, many of you will be confused what all is happening. Okay. It's quite neat algorithm though. All right. Okay. Please go through it all over again. You will understand it. All right. This is what we have studied. So similar to Diffie-Hellman algorithm, Eve can't here derive G raised power BR mod P. So can't recover M. So is a kind of secured from Eve. Okay. Is ElGamal encryption is IND-CPA secure? No. Why? If you use the same key, obviously it is not. Okay, because every time Mallory sends a message for encryption and Alice uses the same key for encryption, then Mallory will come to know about it. Okay, all right, so please read this by yourself. We'll skip this. Now note that parameters that we have to take for ElGamal are, these numbers are very big. So P is 2 raised power 48 is 2048 bits. It means that it can be between 0 to 2 raised power 2048 minus 1. This is very big number and very big range, right? This very big number. G, so this is the value of P, maximum value of P. So G can be anything between 2 to P minus 2. Okay, so it's quite big. Okay, so it's ElGamal is used in large number of standards. It's used in digital signature, which we'll study later, or in email encryption. We also use this SMIME, which you use for email. We use this ElGamal algorithm. Okay, to summarize, ElGamal scheme is extension of DHKE, which is Diffie-Hellman key encryption algorithm. Okay, only thing is that P has to be very large here. Okay, all right. Now, one thing we notice is that we are using public keys. So, for example, Alice uses public key of Bob. Well, how does she know this actual public key of Bob, right? How does she know about it? Okay, if she has got public key of somebody else, then there is an issue. So it means that now that is another problem that we have to solve. That Mallory in between can set her own public key instead of actual recipients, that is a Bob's public key. How do we solve this problem? And we'll study in the next class something called PKI, public key infrastructure. Okay, so that's all for today. Any question? Yeah. Okay, all right, then we'll close. See you on Tuesday then.